Good morning. It's when you see, can you hear me all right? Is that working? Yeah. It's when you see a student like Rob that you're delighted with what you do. You know, that's really what it's about. So thank you, Rob. And I don't know about you, but I found I had to go away this Easter. Because I'm not attached to a parish, it was very easy for me to go away for Easter. And we went to Barcelona and we had a real Easter, following the Good Friday processions, the Easter Vigil, Easter Day in the morning in the cathedral, and then spending an afternoon in Sagrada Familia. I know exactly what you've just heard about, looking at a great Gothic cathedral and looking up and being in the awe and wonder of God and how we work with that in a place like Sagrada Familia. I was so glad that I was not in Christchurch Cathedral on Easter morning. I think how Easter has been hijacked here this year in Dublin is a shame. And that's not just because of my political views. I think if there had been a great military parade celebrating the anniversary of the Republic in Tunisia or in Ankara, in the middle of Ramadan, or as people were trying to celebrate Eid, there would have been outrage around the Islamic world, and rightly so. And as churches, we should have said, nothing comes between us and our Easter faith and our faith in the resurrection. Thank you. Because there was another anniversary that was appropriate to celebrate on, if you want to celebrate something like that. And that anniversary was the 24th of April. The Easter Rising did not start in March, it did not start on Easter Day, it did not start on a Sunday, it started on a Monday in April. And now what are we going to do when somebody says, well, actually we want to have the Dublin City Marathon on a Sunday, would you close your cathedral, please? Or we want to have a St. Patrick's Day parade, but we don't want to have religion getting in the way of our celebrating St. Patrick. And Easter as a theme was hijacked by the leaders of the 1916 Rising. And I really do feel that we're seeing some of the worst that I feared would happen. Because I remember, I'm quite happy to tell you my age, I'm 64. I remember in 1966 what happened with Easter in 1966, and there's a direct connection. Sometimes when I'm teaching church history, I say there's a direct connection between the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Bastille, and Boule of Vogue. Well, there's a direct connection between what happened in Easter 1966 and how the IRA mobilized in 1969 and how the Provisional IRA was formed in December 1969. And we are going to leave a legacy after the 2016 commemorations, and I just wonder what sort of a legacy we're going to leave. Not just a legacy that relies on an Ireland that takes its claims from what happened in 1916, but is it an Ireland that's going to be inclusive? Is it an Ireland that's going to be non-sectarian? Is it an Ireland that's going to have the right sort of values? Now, some of the things that have been done this year already have been good. If you've not yet been to the exhibition in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland it's called Surgeons and Insurgents. It tells a very balanced story about what happened in 1916. Or there's another very good one, Tales from the Other Side in Marsh's Library. And of course there's that wall in Glasnevin Cemetery. I find it so hypocritical of people objecting to all the names of the dead being on that wall together in alphabetical order without discrimination, particularly coming from Sinn Féin, which says that it's against discrimination. And when the Lord Mayor of Dublin is supposed to represent all the people of Dublin. And she was quite happy reading out those names at a Good Friday service in the Unitarian Church in St. Stephen's Green because it gave her a platform. And the thugs who were outside when that wall was being unveiled are the children who are going to be calling for a different type of celebration, commemoration of 1916 in 50 years' time. So just be aware of the seeds that we're sowing. And Sinn Féin has tried to hijack these commemorations. Of course, they don't like to be told that Sinn Féin had no role in the 1916 Rising. In fact, in 1916, Sinn Féin was bankrupt. It was not able to pay its rent on its premises in Harcourt Street. And it was a monarchist party. Arthur Griffith wanted a dual monarchy in which the king would be emperor in London and king in Dublin. Modelled on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Look at what happened to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He wasn't selling that very long after 1916. And the IRA did not exist. The three organisations that are named in the Easter Proclamation are the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the Irish Citizen Army and the Irish Volunteers. The IRA does not exist until after 1916. So they've got no right to say that only IRA and Sinn Féin people should be remembered when we remember 1916. They should be forgotten. They were at home in bed. And in any case, it didn't come into existence. And if you challenge that received story in Ireland today, as Patsy McGarry said in the Irish Times a few weeks ago, you get accusations. Oh, are you really English? Oh, you're not truly Irish. Because to be truly Irish in this society, I'm afraid, once again, it's in danger of becoming that you have to be Green Gaelic, Catholic, and Irish. And that's not what the leaders of the 1916 Rising were like, of course. And we've got to remember the whole picture, whether you agree with them politically or not. When the Irish Citizen Army was set up in the rooms of Trinity College Dublin of the Reverend Robert Malcolm Gwynn, who was Regius Professor of Divinity in Trinity College Dublin and a parishioner in St. Bartholomew's in Ballsbridge. The atmosphere for the Rising was created, was culturally created by people who were involved in the Gaelic revival, like Douglas Hyde, a rector's son from the Midlands, his father from County Cork, Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats in founding the Abbey Theatre, poets, playwrights, actors who were involved in the cultural construction. Most of the people waiting at the Howth Quays, at the pier in Howth for the Howth gun running in 1914 could have been at a select vestry meeting in Howth that day instead. And wiped out of the history of the gun runnings is Sir Thomas Miles, who organised a similar gun running in Kilcool a few weeks later. But because he found his country at war later that month, signed up for the army and became an honorary chaplain, an honorary surgeon to King George V. Written out of our history because he doesn't fit into the Green Gaelic Catholic society that we wanted to pretend we had. Key figures in the Rising itself included people like Countess Markievicz, who was born Constance Gore Booth to the family of Lissadell House. The trade unionist Harry Nichols, a good Dublin working class prod. Dr. Kathleen Lynn, who was a parishioner of Holy Trinity Rathmines all her life. The historian Martin Maguire of Dublin Dundalk Institute of Technology has counted at least 45 Protestants, 21 women and 24 men who were active in the Republican movement between 1916 and 1921. So yes, I am truly Irish, even if I speak with a slightly English accent and I have a name that sounds English. But I don't have to be Green Gaelic, Catholic and Irish and speaking Irish all the time to be accepted as that. And a popular rant that I've heard from people is this what the men of 1916 died for? Some of the things I'm saying to you are not on my blog going with this paper. But some of the things I hear, for example, one activist in Sinn Féin had the gall to post on my Facebook page, you would have not had your silver spoon education but for the men of 1916. Yeah, well, my grandmother would like to know that. Is this what the men of 1916 died for? What about the policemen and the soldiers who died in 1916? The majority of the dead in Easter 1916, 268 of them were civilians. They had no choice to die in 1916. 119 were soldiers, not in the British Army, but the British and Irish Army. It was their army too at the time, and their country was at war, and they felt betrayed. Almost 1 in 5 of those killed were under the age of 19, as many as the people who were on the revolutionary side. What choice did they have about who they were going to die for? What did the 58 on the Republican side die for in 1916? Well, I have some problems about that. What were they proclaiming? Just even the sexism of it. Her manhood. So the men are being mothered by Ireland. What about the women in Ireland? Are they being fathered? They certainly pay no attention to the children. The gallant allies. You know who those gallant allies are referred to in the 1916 proclamation? Germany. Roger Casement had been talking about what was happening in Congo, but you should see what the Germans did to the Herero people in what was Southwest Africa. What they did to black people, African people in their colonies in Tanganyika. What they were then doing to Catholic Belgium, which is why Redmond was able to get so much support for volunteering in the army at the time. They were not gallant allies. Ataturk, who had just completed the Armenian genocide, was Turkey our gallant ally in Europe after a genocide like that and preparing a genocide of the Greeks in Smyrna? What was an alien government or a foreign government? Was Grattan's Parliament an alien government? Was John Redmond sitting in Westminster part of a foreign people? I've actually been told by a Sinn Féin activist for some of the things that I've said. Well, you look at your name, you're not really Irish, you should go back to where you came from. You all came over here as colonists. Yeah. So, if we could just move on to the next one. On a positive note, they promised religious and civil liberty. Tell that to the people who were the victims of the Abercorn restaurant. Tell that to people who were gunned down in Darkley Gospel Hall. They promised equal rights. Yeah, I agree with that. They promised to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and of all its parts. I think there's plagiarism there from the American Declaration of Independence. They promised to cherish all of the children of the nation equally. That would have been good news to the children who were killed in the Rising. They promised a government representative of the whole people of Ireland. Do you think that they were willing to accept that when there were elections and they decided to boycott and not to take the seats that they were elected to in Stormont or in Westminster? And they promised election by suffrage of all her men and women. So obviously that's a concession to women rather than it being a right. I'm unhappy about the idea that violence is a fundamental right to establish our identity. I'm unhappy with the idea of invoking the blessing of the Most High God. Not that I'm unhappy about invoking God, but I'm unhappy about invoking God upon our arms. And they don't mean these limbs, they mean the weapons that they were using in the revolution. And I'm unhappy about speaking of the readiness of Ireland's children to sacrifice themselves. I don't want to see any one of you sacrificed for my dreams. And of course then, Yeats, born into the Church of Ireland, could say, things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Still happens. And when we set up a new state, well, yes, there were some sort of guarantees. But once the legislation started to appear to be legislation in terms of putting into law the morals of one of the churches at the time, Yeats could stand up and say what was achieved. And in a Senate speech, he said about members of the Church of Ireland, we are no petty people. We are one of the great stocks of Europe. We are the people of Burke, we are the people of Grattan, we are the people of Swift, the people of Emmet, the people of Parnell. We have created the most of the modern literature of this country. I think that's one of the things that we have to remember, that the revolution was not in 1916. Perhaps the real revolution that we had here, first of all, was in 1918 when the elected people decided to take their seats separately in Dublin. Perhaps the next assertion of that is when it's to those democratically elected people that the negotiators in London looked to for approval for the treaty. And then there's another revolution in 1926 when De Valera realizes that he should take the majority of Sinn Féin members into the Dáil. And a further revolution in 1932 when Dev takes Fianna Fáil into government, Cosgrave goes into opposition without a murmur. The judiciary, the police, the army, the civil service, the structures of state accept democratic change. And thanks to that securing of democracy just 10 years after a civil war, we find that although there were blue shirts, there was no mass movement of fascism and the far right in this country. That saved democracy in so many ways. While fascism was on the rise in Germany and in Italy and in Hungary and in France and in Spain, that we managed to come through as a democracy. And the 1937 Constitution, 5 years after Dev goes into the Dáil, guarantees and specifically names the rights of particular religious minorities. I think we can interpret Article 44 of the Constitution in a different way today, but at the time I think it was quite revolutionary. And Douglas Hyde, who was a key figure in the revival of the Irish language, becomes the first elected president. But it's interesting how a year later, Douglas Hyde, Eamon de Valera and Oscar Traynor went to a soccer match between Ireland and Poland at Dalymount Park. And Douglas Hyde, the GAA decided to vote him out as patron because he had gone to a foreign game. He decided he wasn't going to apply again to be reinstated in his membership. They didn't do the same to Dev and to Oscar Traynor, although Dev played rugby for Blackrock College and Oscar Traynor played soccer for Belfast Celtic. And they didn't do the same to them. And I think that Dev continued to go to GAA matches, and I think it's because Douglas Hyde was a member of the Church of Ireland. Even though Semple Stadium and the Sam Maguire Cup are called after members of the Church of Ireland. So it shows you that we have grown up since then. Thank goodness. So, we created a new society in which there was a respect for minority rights. And if we move on again, please. What about the future? What do I see for 2016? Do I see hope? Of course there are things that worry me. Usually they're personalized, with bankers, builders, speculators, or even Bertie Ahern being given credibility once again on political shows. I am worried about some things, of course I am. I'm worried about an undercurrent of racism that we don't talk about in areas like this. Dublin 6, Dublin 14, Dublin 16, Dublin 4. I'm worried that we're not taking our share of Syrian refugees. I'm worried that access to healthcare, education, and the professions is still based on class. I'm worried that I'm in and out of hospital quite a lot at the moment. I get wonderful health care and health treatment. But I'm worried that the people who need it only get it because we have private insurance. I'm worried about special needs assistance in schools. I'm worried about people on hospital trolleys. I'm worried that banks are more important than families in their homes. Those are the sort of ideals that I want to see us cherishing, and I want to see us cherishing all the children of the nation equally. And I'd like to see that as being our vision for remembering 1916 in 100 years' time. Thank you.